TGO, Tom Gruenwald Outdoors, is brought to you in part by HT Premium Ice Tackle, Polar Fire Gear. This is how it's done. Vexilar, ice fishing begins when you turn your Vexilar on. And Tourism Saskatchewan, Canada's best freshwater fishing.
Hello everyone and welcome to Tom Gruenwald Outdoors. I'm Tom Gruenwald and today we're going to be doing some jigging and this is going to be kind of fun. I'm with my good friend Larry Smith, and Larry is a guide right here in central Wisconsin. He fishes a lot in the Winnebago system, the Peat and Well flowage, all kinds of expansive, larger bodies of water.
I like big water.
And big water, big fish, right?
Yep, and lots of options. That's the nice part about big water is that you have a lot of options, Tom. And you know, today we're out fishing white bass. All these bodies of water have tremendous populations of white bass. It's one of them things that the cycles normally stay pretty high, not like other species where like our crappies and our perch and our walleyes where they kind of go up and down. The white bass seem to stay pretty stable. So I don't feel bad about keeping a bunch of white bass. And they certainly are, especially ice fishing, a lot of fun to catch.
They really are, and they're usually pretty willing to hit too. They're aggressive. You can get them on spoons with minnow heads is real common, blade baits even, things like that. So what's your favorite presentation out here when you fish these big waters?
Well, you know, it's one of them kind of things is location is probably the biggest thing. They like to move a lot because they are so aggressive at times and they're eating, killing machines. And you know, they really can take an area and deplete the forage base in it real fast, so they do move a lot, Tom, and that's probably the biggest thing right there. Technique, you know, goes from day to day, but like you were saying, you know, minnow heads with spike, or minnow heads with any kind of, you know, spoons, jig and repellas without any bait is a big thing.
And of course, we're fishing a lot of large and expansive flats out here, so the secret really is to not be afraid to move. If you're not seeing fish, don't be afraid to go.
And like I was saying, because of the white bass, they are so aggressive and eating machines, is that they do move a lot. So I mean, they could be here for a couple hours and then they could be a quarter mile away. So that's the whole thing. If you're not marking them, I give a spot 5 minutes. If I'm not marking them, I'm gone.
It's not unusual at all to come out and you catch a fish or two from a hole, and it goes quiet, and then you're off to the next spot. So you do that. It's very important. Have a good quality power auger so you can break those holes out. Sonar is critical, so you can find those fish and then watch and monitor how they're reacting to your presentations.
Well, I can tell you, Tom, probably one of the key things to catching numbers of white bass is that when you catch one, you want to have a stiff enough rod where you want to get that fish out of the hole as fast as you can. What happens if you let that fish fight on a lighter rod, it'll actually spook the rest of them. Some of the guys, like we always call them the tubers out here, they use 14-pound test line, no reels, they hand over hand every one of them, and they are very, when it comes to being productive as far as catching large numbers of white bass, nobody's more productive than these guys are. Like I say, the key is if you want to catch a lot of them, to get them out as fast as you can, get the bait down there. And the big thing is once you can get one or two to strike, to hit, that's like starts a chain of reaction, bing, bing. And like I said, as long as you're pulling them out fast, you can continue to catch fish after fish out of the same spot.
Well, I've already got my bait dropped in. I've marked a few fish, and I hope we're going to get into them here right away, Larry. This should be a good time when you're today.
Tom.
All right, thank you.
Always a pleasure.
Well, we're on a really light bite on these white bass. The wind settled down here just a little bit. There's a nibble. So I thought, you know what, I'm just going to come outside and just kind of move around a little bit, kind of see if we can get on the outer edges of these schools. See if we can pick up a couple more fish. And we can always head back in and warm up inside the shanty. But this is not what I would say is a typical white bass bite at all. I mean, oftentimes with white bass, we're using a lot of spoons or larger lures tipped with minnows or minnow heads. They're usually quite aggressive. Just with the cold front and with the conditions that we're having, we certainly have found a school of fish, but they're not coming up and pounding any of the bigger classic baits, so we switched off to something a little more finesse. I was all rigged up here and ready to go with one of the little laser rockers, and I had tipped that with some spikes. That was drawing fish. It got attention, but they would just come up and look and they wouldn't hit. So I had to tone things down a little bit and go to this Marmuska tungsten dancer. That seems to be the answer so far.
There's more fishing action to come right here on TGO.
I got a couple of fish down there, and there we go. That one feels a little bit better. Oh yeah. That one's got a little more girth to him. It's just fun when you set the hook into these. They fight so hard, and then when you get one that's a little bit heavier fish like this, then you know you really caught something. This one's a lot fatter than those other couple fish, just maybe a couple inches longer. Again, all I did was just kind of jumped holes. We're fishing over maybe 10 or 20 yards the other side of this. This fish is a little bit bigger than the last two that we caught, and that's just how it is sometimes. You kind of work on different spots or you get onto a different school. Came about 10 yards from where we were fishing before. Over there we had two smaller fish. Came over this way, got one a little bit bigger. Hopefully that'll be the trend. Let that one go, get our line back down. I'll tell you what, this Marmuska tungsten dancer has been an effective bait all year long. The smaller sizes, like the number 16 hooks, have been great for bluegills and panfish. I went up to the size 14, and I've been using that for some other species, and I really didn't expect at all that I was going to have to go that way for these white bass. I was fully anticipating we were going to be using more spoons, smaller swimming baits, things like that, and these fish have just been biting so lightly that I said, you know what, I'm going to just try that little bigger number 14 Marmuska tungsten dancer and see how that goes, and they're all over that. So what this is, it's got a bullet-shaped tungsten body, and that tungsten, again, is heavier than lead, gets down fast. And we just got a clip right here to a little dropper, loose-hanging treble hook, and that treble hook is an epoxy treble, which has got this colored eye at the bottom, and I'm just tipping that with a couple of small spikes. The reason we call it the dancer, of course, is because it tends to dance. That little hook will kind of dance and bounce around as I just do a real subtle jigging motion with that, so I can get down fast, and then I've got that nice light treble hook that's real easy for those soft biting fish to get into their mouths. Let the bait back down, and while I'm lowering that, I'd like to show you the system that I'm using. I'm using the new Polar Fire Select SX rod, and this is a light action, which is really nice. It's perfect for setting the hook into these white bass, and if I do happen to catch a bigger crappie or even a walleye, I've got the sensitivity I need, yet plenty of backbone to set the hook and fight the fish. But what's really nice about this particular model, especially when we're fishing in this cold weather, is these larger guides. These stainless steel guides really don't let that water beat up on it. They don't freeze up too badly at all. If you do get a little bit of ice in there, it's very easy just to kind of poke it out quickly. And then I've got that all set up on a nice AccuCast style reel, angling my line up to the stripper guides. Good front drag system, infinite anti-reverse reel, so I can stop at whatever depth I want to fish. I got the perfect system for working these baits. And even that little dancer, this rod is so sensitive, being graphite, that I can feel all the movement of that dancer. And because of the weight of that tungsten jig, which is a little bit heavier, that helps to pull that line tighter, takes out any little bits of coils or anything in the line, which is helping me just to be able to feel even the slightest strikes from these light biting fish today. So it's really a super, super good system, all in one. And really, I'm surprised. Again, I really expected these white bass to be a lot more active and be hitting bigger baits, but it's just another good lesson learned. When the weather changes, things happen. Sometimes you got to make adjustments, and making the adjustments is making all the difference today. We got some fish down there, and just trying to work these fish, they're being extremely finicky. You got to try different things. You know, try jigging the bait up sometimes like this, pulling it away from them. That'll get them to strike. Sometimes dropping it down gets them to strike. We've talked about these things before. It's just a classic finesse jigging situation. Sometimes just holding the bait still or shaking it a little bit in place can be the key to getting these fish to trigger. You got to try different things. Whether you're lowering the bait or raising the bait, jiggling it slightly, holding it still, just keep trying different things. Don't give up. If you're marking some fish and they're in the area, try everything you can, work it hard. Sometimes it's a different lure style, sometimes a little different size. Maybe you got to downsize a little bit or make it bigger. Maybe it's a different color. Maybe it's trying a different tipper. Maybe you want to use a minnow head versus a spike or a waxworm. There's all different sorts of things you can try. Of course, at some point, if it's not working, it's best to change location, and then you can go through that whole process again. But today's a classic example of this is not what you would anticipate normally for white bass, that you'd have to go and kind of finesse these fish and go so late. But that's what's working. There you go, a little guy. Just can't believe how we're catching them. And look at that, just lip hooked. You know, usually these white bass, they hit these spoons and things, they'll actually swallow. You can just tell he was just barely hooked in the lip there. Just real light bite, wasn't swallowing it, not very aggressive. You just gotta work that bait real lightly, real gingerly, and let them come up there and they're nipping it just like a little perch or a little bluegill would. We'll let this one go.
More fishing action online at tgofishing.com.
Larry, could you show us that knot? You were mentioning that you like those first strike minnows with the head kind of pointed downward.
Very important, Tom, for sure, because you're not using any kind of bait. So basically what I'm doing is just tying a clinch knot on this, and you take the front of the loop and you put it right across the front of the bait, and then basically take the back, and see how I'm not going through the hole that you would normally go through, and then you clinch it down. Okay, and basically what that does, you're wrapping around the whole body, cut off obviously the excess line, and what it does is it keeps that nose pointed down all the time like that. So you could go through and just hook it right through here, what would happen, how you normally would hook it, but every time you get a strike and you miss that fish, you got to bring the bait up and pull it back again. Well, this keeps that nose pointed down all the time, and you constantly are pounding it in the bottom and then bringing it up 2 or 3 feet. I don't like to use any bait at all, no minnow heads or any spikes or anything else on the jig and repellers.
Okay, do you find any pattern, Larry, with these white bass? I mean, I know you can catch them on the bottom, and a lot of times they're also suspended, but are there any sorts of conditions out here in this open water where you tend to find the more active fish higher versus jigging right on the bottom like you're doing there?
Well, I tell you, Tom, most of the time these white bass are a little bit tighter to bottom than you would normally think. It seems like the walleyes and the crappies are off 4, 5, 6 feet. And the big thing is right now, the area we're fishing, the water clarity, these fish can see about 8 foot. So what I do a lot of times is I'll pound the bottom, and then I'll bring it up. And what I like to happen is I like the fish to start layering underneath me like that. And then all of a sudden you get, 4, 5, 6 of them underneath you, and then they start getting aggressive on who wants to hit the bait first. So, and that's the technique. You just got to get them active, and all of a sudden, like I said earlier, when you can get one to hit, and it's like a chain reaction after that.
So do you think part of that just is competitively? Some of those fish are prone to more feeding on the suspended fish, like those walleyes are up maybe on the shad, and then you got the white bass feeding on something off the bottom?
No doubt. I would say you're 100% right about that. Yep.
So I think it's important. Always remember that when you're out fishing these fish, don't think stereotypically. A lot of people right away, well, yeah, all those white bass are probably suspended out there because they find them that way maybe during the summer, but that's not the same.
No, it's not the case at all, and especially, middle of the day, Tom, these fish are definitely a lot tighter to bottom too, and these kind of waters, they get a lot of pressure too and a lot of drilling, and that'll drive them down too. So, yep, definitely pounding that bottom and staying more bottom oriented, until you can get them to start layering is the key to catching a lot of them.
And don't be afraid, if you do mark a fish while you're in any of these waters up higher, come up for them, because it could be a crappie, it could be a walleye, it could be white bass. They'll still come through higher up from time to time. So it's important to watch your sonar, experiment, be versatile, and be open-minded.
Yeah, for sure. The sonar is the most important tool out here, I would say, because you need to know how the fish are reacting. You need to know if they're there. And like I say, when you're towards the bottom all the time, and all of a sudden you see something up about 5, 6 feet, you wind as fast as you can and go by them at least 2 feet. If you seem to go right to them, it spooks them. It's just not natural for a bait to go right to a game fish,
Right.
So predator. So, yep.
Very good. Okay, well, I appreciate the tips,
problem.
and we're going to go down here and see if we can get some.
I would use this one.
Hey, thanks. I appreciate that. Well, that didn't take too long. I just put on this jig here. Larry was over here by me, and he says, let's try that little first strike type swimming minnow. And he rigged it up with his with his knot so that that head was pointing downward. Bounce it on the bottom a couple times and start working it. And I didn't even have that jig down in the water for a minute and a half, I bet you. And that white bass came up and hit that right away.
TGO, Tom Gruenwald Outdoors.
It's really interesting on a large body of water like this where white bass are just cruising and roaming open areas. As we're moving here this morning, I've been in 10 or 15 different holes at least, and everything has been between 17 and 18 feet deep. It's all just a giant flat, 17 to 18 feet deep. And it's funny how one spot 100 yards away, I could barely get anything to turn on or bite. Just kind of move over, try a little different spot, and the fish are moving, and we're getting them to bite over here. So it's important to be very mobile with these white bass. Keep trying different locations. Even if you're seeing some fish, if they're not getting them to go, move to another spot, see if you can get some to bite. You can always go back to those prior spots. If nothing else, just hit a waypoint on your GPS, head back over to those and see if those fish will turn on or start going a little bit later too. It'll especially happen if you get a few fish going and other people kind of move in on it. You get a lot of activity on the ice that can shut things down or spook or scatter the fish. Don't be afraid to keep moving. And when you get into those different spots, try different things. We got a couple of fish going now. Here we go. This feels like a nicer fish too. Oh yeah. There we go. Another nice whitey right there. Yeah. Well, look at, you see how light that was? I just picked up the fish here, pulled it up by the line, and that hook just came right out of his mouth. That's how light these fish are biting. And this one I actually caught up off the bottom. That one was about 6 feet off of the bottom this time. That's a good sign. Just maybe these fish will start going a little bit. Look at that. Release. One thing I'd like to point out is the importance of setting your drag properly. Again, I'm using a 6-pound test line here with a 4-pound leader. And since most of these white bass are probably in the neighborhood of 3/4 of a pound to a pound, I shouldn't have anything to worry about. But there are walleyes and some larger fish in here, and we could catch potentially a bigger white bass as well. So it is important to make sure your drag is set properly. And what I like to do is just get a good reel like this AccuCast with a nice front drag. And first of all, I'll set it a little loose and then just turn it off maybe a click or two. Just enough where it's tight enough I'm going to be able to get a hook set, but if that fish does hit hard and wants to go, that spool can turn. And that is, again, it's really important, especially if you're any kind of a body of water like this where we could catch potentially a larger fish. And other things can happen too. Maybe you catch that fish or you hook that. Possibly you catch on your transducer cord or the bottom of the ice for a second, and it really does help just to have a little bit of something that's going to give, and that drag is right there to help you out. Make sure you get a reel with a good drag and set it properly. There you go. There's a white bass. Came up and took our dancer again. These fish get quite a bit bigger out here. I've seen some white bass that'll be pushing 2 or even 3 pounds on some lakes in the area here. But they're just a lot of fun to catch. And so we get some a little bit bigger than that yet. Got a whole bunch of them coming through right now. This is where you do the quick change. I had that first strike minnow down there, and I've got one of the tungsten dancers. And again, the nice thing about this is tungsten I can get down pretty quickly. I've got some fish coming through right now, and the window of opportunity sometimes doesn't last very long. And I can get this more delicate lure down there pretty quickly because of that heavy weight of the tungsten. And we'll see if we can get one of these fish to respond on that. They were coming up and they were looking at that first strike swimming minnow, but they wouldn't hit it. And now I kind of try to finesse them here. See if we can get one of them to take that. Oh, I missed him. He did come up and hit it though. That's the difference. And again, these fish move really quickly. Now I missed that, and I can get back down to the bottom again where those fish are coming through, and I got another chance at them. If I've got a lighter jig, it might be too long. By the time I get that bait back down again, he might be moved, at school might be gone, and my opportunity is passed. But using that tungsten, I made it work. And we got the fish. Boy, I just love fishing these white bass. They fight so hard. They're fun to catch. It's a challenge to come out, move around, and find these fish. Again, sometimes having a little, some kind of a little portable shack is a good way to go if you don't like being outside or if you've got a family with you. But the main thing is just making sure that you stay mobile and stay versatile, and you're definitely going to be able to get out and catch more fish. Remember, white bass, they're kind of nomadic, they're opportunistic, and they're going to move from one place to another, and they're going to move quickly. Hey, I appreciate you joining us here today on Tom Gruenwald Outdoors. We look forward to seeing you again next time for some more ice fishing.
TGO has been brought to you in part by HT Premium Ice Tackle, Polar Fire Gear. This is how it's done. Vexilar. Ice fishing begins when you turn your Vexilar on. And Tourism Saskatchewan. Saskatchewan, Canada's best freshwater fishing. TGO, where it's all ice fishing all the time.